this interview is for Outlaw Review, and we are a website that focuses on everything from heavy metal, country rock, punk, everything that you might think of musically, but also we like to sometimes delve into other types of entertainment as well.
I got you covered on that, apparently.
Most definitely, you speak to a lot of the different things that we're interested in.
Cool.
So let's first start talking about Ghoultown. Tell me what's been going on with Ghoultown lately. I do see that there is a show coming up with Doyle in Texas in October.
Right. Yeah, for Ghoultown, last year we put out a new album called Ghost of the Southern Sun, which we, did some show dates to promote. Last summer we did some dates in the UK, which consisted of a huge festival and a show in London. And this year we haven't played a lot. We went through a member change, which kind of slowed us down a bit. And we're finally going to get back to playing shows this coming October, which the first one is in Dallas with Doyle, near Halloween, so very appropriate all around. And then we'll be able to do some more shows after that. We haven't been touring like we used to, partially because of obligations of members, my increasing involvement in television and films and books. So we just kind of do the bigger shows rather than just sort of a general tour everywhere type approach.
So any plans on any future recordings in the next coming year?
Yeah, we slowly write songs, which I write most of the songs, so that's up to me. There was a gap of 10 years between the last full-length album, which was Life After Sundown, and then our newest one, Ghost of the Southern Sun, although we had done several other interim releases, such as the Mistress of the Dark EP. But, as far as full albums, it's taken a while, and I don't think it would take another decade, for a full length or anything. But, we're probably looking at a couple of years, intervals before we drop anything new. Last year we did a one-off song for a Cleopatra Records Halloween compilation. So, as things come up, we end up recording a song or two, or, slowly work on an album.
So do you find that more of your time right now is invested in your cryptology research and writing of your book?
Yes, it's pretty much come to that because, Ghoultown's been around since the late 90s, and the band is done well. I mean, we're still popular, and, as far as, our indie underground status. And, what happened was around 2010, after we had done a European tour and stuff, we were kind of just taking a break, and I'd always wanted to write a book. So I ended up writing a book which was called The Beast of Boggy Creek, just literally for my own, just because I wanted to do it. And that suddenly turned into a big deal. It was the fastest selling book in the publisher's history. Television shows started calling, and so it kind of opened up a whole new thing for me, which has just become a snowball because more and more television. I'm involved in documentary films. I've become a narrator for films, which is cool because it's kind of a voice thing. I mean, you got singing, it's entertainment. I like writing the books. So whereas I used to sort of work haphazard writing jobs in between the music to support myself, now this has become, just a full-time job into itself. So it's definitely a juggling match as to what I can do and how much I can do for the band and how much I have to do for book deals and so forth.
So originally, where did the fascination with monsters and wanting to research them come from?
Well, it was something that was always there. I mean, everything I've done, um, entertainment-wise or creatively, has always had a tie to monsters. Of course, Ghoultown, the lyrics are, there's horror type lyrics. We have the kind of the dark image. Bands I had done before uh, had, similar ties to that. And then, um, just always a fan of horror movies. And particularly when I was young, I really liked stories of Bigfoot, Yeti, things like that. And I saw a film called The Legend of Boggy Creek back in the 70s, which is kind of a cult horror classic at this point. And man, that really, for me, gave me the chills because it was like, fictional monsters are great and awesome, but this was almost like, man, this could be real. I could be in the woods hunting with my dad and see, a 7-foot tall hairy ape-like creature. That fascinated me. So I've always read and kind of followed the history of sightings of alleged real life creatures my whole life. And um, I was brought on to write for the horror magazine Rue Morgue in about 2009, knowing my knowledge of cryptozoology creatures. They had me kind of specialize in that. And that's what kind of led to me wanting to also write a book. And so it's just something that's always been there.
And how did you develop the interest? Was it all self-sourced from just researching and reading all independently, or did you link up with any other groups and try to learn from them?
Yeah, I mean, at first it was just, having read all those sort of books and watched, you know, early documentaries from the 1970s on to, to modern films. And once I don't know, I just started getting more into it, and I kind of looked into groups that were actually going out actively researching, looking for Bigfoot, things like that, using modern technology. And I just inadvertently discovered that there was one in Texas, so I did hook up with those guys, and that's when I really kind of was introduced to field research. Not just reading and doing literary type research, but like going in the field, and they showed me what they do to uh, try to elicit sightings of these creatures. So that really helped me to kind of get my foot in with like going out. And I'd grown up hunting with my father, so I was very um, accustomed to the woods and swamps and all over the southern U.S. And um, so getting with the groups really helped kind of jumpstart it, and also kind of put me in the network of where I could then get information on new sightings, personal interviews with people who claim to have seen these creatures, even in the area of Boggy Creek where I'd seen the old um, documentary movie, and that all kind of then was channeled into what my books have become.
Talk to me a little bit about the research process. Like, you come up with a concept and then how you go about researching that particular creature then.
Most of the ones I've written about are what I call small town monsters, legends that are regionally known. And since I'm from Texas, Ghoultown has a Texas theme and kind of a southern thing. I've always liked that kind of southern element to the monster stories. I haven't really written a book on Bigfoot in general or anything like that. It's always kind of a southern monster. So, for example, with a book I wrote called Lizard Man, it had to do with sightings of a reptilian humanoid creature in South Carolina, almost like a modern creature from the Black Lagoon, literally, where people saw something fitting the description of a, human-like reptilian type monster in this swamp. So, I knew about those stories, and there's a lot of newspaper articles that I hunted down and kind of get the gist of the stories. And then I went to the little town of Bishopville, South Carolina, where I visited with eyewitnesses. There was a retired sheriff who had been involved in the case because it was, highly public and involved the police and all kinds of stuff. And so then I met with him and stayed out there for, a week and just kind of looked at the area, looked into the history, talked to, people at the library, talked to people who had been around at the time of the sightings. And then, through all of that developed, the entire story of everything that had taken place in this so-called Lizard Man case. And as usual, when you do all of that, you find that there's much more to the story than what was just sort of sporadically printed in the newspapers or what you're going to find on the internet. I mean, you can Google Bishopville Lizard Man and it'll get a ton of hits, but by going there and kind of immersing myself in that process of interviewing people and looking at the place where it was sighted, it really creates a more engaging book.
Definitely. And speaking of the Lizard Man, I've heard some stories where, and in fact, I heard an interview with a pretty known musician who was on the Howard Stern show who said that he actually witnessed a lizard man or someone transform into something as such in the record industry. Have you, being within music, have you heard of any of the types of legends about Hollywood and the music industry being controlled by something like that?
Well, with the unpredictable and erratic nature of the music business, perhaps, yes, it may be under control of reptilian humanoids. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, that's kind of a broader theme where sort of there's this almost a conspiracy theory that people believe that there are reptilians that have infiltrated the human race and can disguise themselves, and they have put themselves into positions of power, whether that be, residing over a record label or even bigger, in the White House or in positions of government. That's kind of a, there's just infinite kind of threads you can go down with this reptilian thing, because obviously I'm kind of looking at it as a monster in a swamp, but there's also a tie to extraterrestrial sightings and this sort of reptilian humanoid thing. I don't know particularly the one you're talking about offhand. I can remember, yes, there was some prominent people named which are supposedly these reptilians, but obviously no proof of it or anything like that.
From the creatures that you have researched, where do you believe they come from?
Well, I mean, obviously that's the golden question, because you have a lot of anecdotal, word of mouth sightings, and in the case of such as Bigfoot, you do have some compelling hard evidence, such as footprints, hair samples that appear primate-like but can't be identified. But ultimately, without any bodies or specimens, it's hard to say where they come from. But in each case, I have sort of an operating theory, I suppose, such as Bigfoot. I think while it seems improbable, it's not impossible that some, relic apes or some species of apes or relic hominid or something has survived deep in the woods and has managed to remain elusive. And it's something that we, haven't been able to prove yet, with lizard men and, mothman and chupacabra, all these other ones, there's other explanations that can be offered from, for example, Mothman. I mean, it could have been an unusually large bird. It could have been some sort of government, you know, experiments. It could have been, um, a paranormal being. I don't know. But at the bottom line, you always find that these witnesses, at least a portion of them, definitely saw something unusual. It's not just mass hallucination or made up stuff. And while there's an element of hysteria where other people may have seen things and interpreted them to be the creature, at the core, usually the original witnesses, man, they saw something that's just hard to explain. So that is sort of the dangling carrot that keeps you going in these cases where that people saw something weird. It's just trying to, determine just what it was.
Why do you believe that, like, for example, like the Yeti and some of these other creatures that you've researched and so many other cryptology groups have researched, why are they so elusive and hard to actually document?
Well, that's presumably if they exist, they would have to exist in small numbers. They would be presumably above average intelligence for an animal in order to have the skills and willingness to sort of stay elusive. In the case of the Yeti, you're dealing with huge spaces of land that are extremely difficult to, trek across. And, it's not impossible that some small population of creature, even if it's not like what we kind of popularize as the Yeti. Sort of movies show it as this big white, um, some big white animal. That's not the case. The sightings, the descriptions describe it as something that's brown, is sort of ape-like, could be like a bear. So even if it turned out to be some sort of an archaic bear, it is the Yeti, and maybe not as dramatic as we might imagine in Hollywood. Still, it's not impossible that a creature like that could exist. In the case of stuff roaming around in the middle of America, much harder to explain. But again, you just kind of go with, if even, if 1,000 people said they saw Bigfoot and only, 999 of them were wrong, if the one person did see it, then it exists. So, there are enough credible sightings to where it just keeps the puzzle open.
And out of everything that you've researched, what is the spookiest or weirdest thing that you've come across?
Well, there's elements of spookiness to them all, and that's probably my number one attraction to this, which kind of stems again from my childhood, is that, I love the spooky encounters. You're parked in, a remote area and you see a giant, huge humanoid winged-like creature, or you're boating through a swamp and you see this, hairy ape-like thing run through the trees. That's what fascinates me. And for me, I've always been attracted to the Legend of Boggy Creek case, and that translated into my Beast of Boggy Creek book. But in that one is the spookiest because, you have some accounts where you've got like rugged coon hunters who are down there and they run across this thing and it shows aggressive behavior. It seems very monstrous and protective of its environment. And, I've paddled those swamps and gone through those woods, and there's been a few times where, even though I claim to be fearless or what have you, there's times when, I came across what appeared to be a trackway or something, and man, the hair on the back of your neck stands up, and that's at the point you realize, man, if something's out here and it comes out of that woods and it's 6 or 7 feet tall, looks like some kind of a unknown ape. That gives you a moment to pause and think, this is some spooky stuff. So, I mean, the spookiest stuff has been when I've been personally out there. And in my head, I have all these sightings and stories and history that's kind of floating around. And then I see something, it sort of just brings it all together. And those are the spookiest moments. And parts of my books and documentaries and things that I think are compelling.
And being fascinated with that spooky quality, has any of your research ever transitioned into research of the paranormal in any way?
Well, I mean, it obviously intersects with that, and kind of, even cryptozoology gets lumped in with paranormal because ultimately paranormal is something that's unusual and not normal. So, yeah, I mean, I don't necessarily research that stuff because there's so much, I specialize in what I do, and there's so much just straight up monster reports. But within that, I get plenty of reports of ghosts. Sometimes there's a swamp where there's all sorts of phenomenon occurring, from ghostly entities to UFO sightings to sightings of, huge dinosaur-looking birds to, obviously Bigfoot-like creatures. So, it all intersects, and I get reports, and I'm looking into, pretty much all aspects of it at sometimes when I'm, looking at a particular area, because there's always just an amazing number of spooky things that can happen, whether that's due to the area or there's something special about the area, I don't know, or whether these things are, concentrating their selves in those places. But, it's all really intriguing to me.
And it's just so vast how many phenomenon things are out there, and the more you seem to research, I feel like the more you find.
Oh, absolutely. And that's kind of why this has become such a, an undertaking for me, and just snowballing, because there is so much, and the more you look at it, the more realize how much weird stuff is out there. And today it's kind of popular. I mean, with all the shows that have been on TV for the last decade, whether it's Finding Bigfoot or Ghost Adventures, man, it's got people really interested in this stuff, which I think is cool. I mean, it's, the world is kind of a downer with politics and all this other stuff, which is why, I've primarily spent my life playing music with strange bands like Ghoultown and looking into monster reports, because to me it's like it leaves some excitement and mystery in the world, which would be missing, I think, if I didn't do all this stuff. I mean, it's just, I think other people find it, exciting as well, because, you kind of think, wow, maybe there's a little bit more to stuff than we really understand. And the more you look into it, the more you realize that's the case.
Absolutely. So what's next on the radar for you? Is there anything right now that you're researching or working on?
Yeah, I've got next year I'll have a new book out, which is about Momo, the Missouri monster, and that's another kind of small town uh, phenomenon, in which does involve multiple paranormal type things. There was a creature, a Bigfoot-like creature seen, and also corresponding strange lights and UFO-like activity in the sky. So I've got that coming out, and I'm involved in a documentary series by the company Small Town Monsters, and we have a new documentary coming out called Gray Road Beast, which comes out this October. I narrate most of their films, and also either co-write and have appeared in some of them. Next year we're also doing a Momo Missouri monster film, another film on Thunderbirds, and yeah, just in between there, just kind of as Ghoultown songs or inspiration inspires me, I kind of keep work on a song and kind of add those up. So there's always something monster or music in the works.
Well, what great research and elements to be able to transfer into your songs, and it just all seems to fit really well.
Yeah, people always ask, when is Ghoultown going to do, some write about cryptids and things, and I've kind of thought about that because that kind of would tie the two things together. I mean, Ghoultown is kind of a dark Western horror band, and then
Right.
it's got its own kind of vibe, which was established long before I was known for writing cryptid books. But yeah, I mean that's one thing that I definitely, if there's time and I could do, would be very cool to kind of do a Ghoultown theme where it kind of tied the two things together.
Perhaps that could be a theme of a future album.
Yeah, absolutely. And that would, I think in many ways, ironically, Ghoultown, even though my endeavors and success at what I'm doing now with the books and films has limited my time with Ghoultown, it's made the band more popular. I mean, simply by being on TV, it's attracted a lot of people that probably would have never heard of Ghoultown, or probably wouldn't necessarily think they like that kind of music or whatever. But what I've seen is, even though we don't really just tour massively, which is fine. I spent many years touring, and we toured a lot, and I've toured with other bands. So I was kind of trying to, not be on the road so much. But even with that, the popularity of Ghoultown seems to have just continually increased over the years. And yeah, I think it's because people are exposed to it via my other interest or involvement with Rue Morgue magazine or what have you. So it's kind of coming all together.
Definitely, I think people find out about one thing that you do, and I think people who have an interest in cryptozoology or have an interest in horror are probably going to be automatically drawn to Ghoultown.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I just was a guest at the Mothman Festival in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, which is a huge event, draws like 12,000 people. But this little girl came up and wanted some stuff autographed. She had a copy of uh, one of the documentaries called Boggy Creek Monster that I'd been in, and she had Ghoultown CDs. And this was like a little, she was, I don't know, 10 years old, I don't know, but she was wearing a Mothman shirt. And I'm like, yeah, this girl's got it going on. She's got the whole deal. And so it's really cool to meet people like that, especially when they kind of are following both aspects of what I'm doing.
Most definitely. I definitely thank you for taking the time to share both of those things with me today. Is there anything else that you wanted to share with Outlaw Review, or anything else that I've missed speaking with you?
No, I appreciate you having me. And if you want to check out something that's airing on TV right now, if you've got the Shudder channel, check out the Joe Bob Briggs, The Last Drive-In, which was just recently released. I'm on the episode called The Legend of Boggy Creek, and talked to Joe Bob, another Texan and kind of an outlaw himself, about the subjects of the monster. And anybody can check out the rest of my work at lyleblackburn.com, of course.
Absolutely, and we'll be sure to share those links, and I'll go and look for that episode.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, thank you for taking the time to speak with me today, and have a wonderful day.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Send me links or what have you, and I'll spread them around.
Absolutely, will do.
Okay. See ya.
Thank you. Bye-bye.